Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builders Supply. In this video is to bring you a closer look at the Soss. This is the part number 218-IT. This is a router guide template for their 218 series hinges. It's obviously what the box looks like. And inside the box is, of course, the template. A couple of pins or nails, and then the installation instructions. So the installation instructions are included, but they're also linked to down below this video, so you'll be able to refer to them while you're reviewing the item. While we go through this video, I'm going to go through those step by step. Not quite step by step, but an overview. And then, of course, the business end of the template is the actual wood template itself. And it's a handy device to have, and it's not complicated at all. You know, the reason to buy this rather than make it, and maybe you'll make future ones yourself, but all of the dimensions are predetermined and they're accurate for the hinge that you're installing. And in my opinion, given the cost, it might be just preferable to purchase the template because of the cost. It is not very expensive. There are some templates that are incredibly expensive, and with a little bit of product knowledge, time, and desire, you can make your own template, even if you have to make a couple to get it right. But given the cost of these simple templates from Soss, it's a good argument can be made, I should say, to purchase them directly. So the template itself, and then a couple of nails, and then the nails are what you'll use to physically attach the template down to the jamb or to the edge of the door. I'm going to put those aside. The template itself is going to have a couple of locating pins, top and bottom. And basically when you attach this or put this onto the edge of the door, it basically sets the back set of where the hinge is going to fall in the door, but also the frame as well. And those pins are fixed. When you use this template to go onto the door and frame, you will certainly accomplish a flush inset where the door is flush with the pull side of the jamb. Doors are typically inset ever so slightly. This template would not allow that. Now you can probably make that happen. You're just going to need to space the template when you attach it to the door to make that fit inset into the frame, which is generally about 3/32 of an inch. So if you were going to pad those pins, you could emulate that sort of scenario. But if you don't, then the door is going to be flush. It'll be a flush application. Again, where the door is flush to the face of the frame. You'll have a couple of shim blocks. I don't recall the proper name for those. Let's take a look in the installation instructions. They are called the spacer tabs, is what they're called. And those are used when machining the door and frame, and we'll get to that. You've got a couple of guide nails or screws or pins that are here, and that is to allow you to make the deep mortise and then the shallow plate mortise. So you'll have the body, which is the deep portion, and then you'll have the plate, which is the larger outside area. Give you some basic dimensions of what this template measures right now. Okay, this template is 2 15/16 wide. It is a hardwood species. It might be beech, might be the species of wood, or aspen. 16-inch tall. You know, it wouldn't be aspen, forgive me. It could be poplar as well. Thickness, about 5/8. Okay. Now, let's take a look at the installation instructions. If you'll pull that up, and this video now is going to go through the installation instructions. Top of the first page, use only Porter cable template guide bushing 42024 and the 42237 lock nut to assure the following guide bushing dimensions that are listed there. The reason that's crucial is because the diameter of the guide bushing, the outside diameter, and the size of this preparation, and the size that the hinge requires to fit are all directly related. Those dimensions all have to be correlated properly. Meaning, if you used a guide bushing other than that one, it's okay, but you must be sure that it follows those dimensions. The 3/4 inch OD, because again, if your guide bushing is larger or smaller, you're going to get a larger or smaller preparation when you route the door. So if you cannot locate one that will work compatibly with those dimensions, just get that version of the that Porter cable version. It goes on to say, to avoid installation problems, we recommend that you do a practice installation on some type of wood before going whole hog. In the door shop, we would always have a door laying around that would have, countless practice run preps for hinges, for overhead stops, for lock face, for mortise lock preparations, for exit device function holes, etc. The first time you're doing it, certainly are going to want to make sure that you have it correct. So do a preparation. That will reinforce your understanding of how to go about doing it confidently. But you'll proceed with the knowledge, knowing that when you're done, you're not going to have a catastrophic error. Okay. Safety, obviously, shop safety applies. I, of course, see ear protection as important as eye protection, etc. There is, in that safety section, if you're not, there is a recommended listing for a router bit down below. You're going to want to use a 1/2 inch diameter. 2-flute carbide is what I would suggest that you use for prepping the door. Okay, now as we move into the operation of prepping the door, the field below the safety gives you a list of those things that you'll need to actually do this operation. Extra long router bit. So I would use, I don't know the exact length, but like a 2 9/16 long, like for a plunge router, 2-flute 1/2 inch carbide bit. Router bit manufacturer of your personal preference. You're going to need the template guide bushing and lock nut, as referred to earlier. You'll need the hinge template itself. You're going to need a measuring, instrument, tape measure, ruling stick, whatever. Maybe you've created your own spacing sticks. You'll, of course, need a drill, and they even mention a brace. Don't know anyone that would use a brace, but I suppose that you certainly could with great effect. And then a selection of spade bits or wood bits. You don't need many, that's for sure. The size of the tool that you'll use in this spade or wood bit area will be dependent on the hinge that you're working on. Now, moving to Figure 1, it shows you a legend or a summary of what all the pieces are called. That's the locating pin. Your 2 nails will go through here and here when you attach it to the door and frame. You've got your guide pins, and those are basically coarse drywall screws. And you've got your spacer tab. Okay, they show below Figure 1 what a cross section looks like of the hinge when it's prepped from the elevation of the door itself, or actually if it's laying down flat and you're looking at the door from the face of the door. There is one thing I'd like to mention there. They show side view of mortise or hinge. They show first mortise, which I called the plate earlier, the part of the hinge that you see. Then they show a second mortise after the guide pins are inserted. So basically what they're saying is do the big plate prep first, then go in and do the body prep. I disagree with that wholeheartedly. I would do that in reverse. I would do the body prep first with the guide pins installed. I would then remove them and do the plate prep. My logic is, because I did it once, I want to get that router as close to being exited off the piece as safely as possible, in the sense of, if I were to do the body first and I overdid it ever so slightly, I still have the ability, because I've not done the plate prep, the shallow mortise, to go in and clean up my little mistake, my little overcut. when you do that plate prep, and let's say that you're working with that tool and it's still turning ever so slightly, you've exited off the work and it's still turning and you nick that door, it's done. So I suggest doing the deep portion first. However, they're saying the opposite, but my actual experience of doing it I would personally do it opposite. On the right side of page 1, let's look at the recommended spacing of Soss invisible hinges. Now, that's all very clear, and I won't beleaguer those points, except to add, when they're telling you put 2 hinges at the top and 1 at the bottom, that's the way you want to do it. You don't have to, but that's the better way to do it, because, in fact, 70% of the door's weight is hung on that top hinge, whatever it is. A double-acting spring hinge, a ball-bearing traditional single-acting, normal 5-knuckle hinge, a Soss invisible hinge, whatever it is. The logic is you want to have 2 hinges up at the top that will share the load of everything down below it. That bottom hinge isn't doing much of the weight carrying of the door. And while it might be considered atypical to prep the door in such a fashion where you've got 2 at the top, and you see that in Europe, you'll see it all the time. You'll see it on cruise boats. I just have to think that they follow the convention of what is mechanically more commonsensical to do. 2 hinges at the top. You never see that here in the United States, or you don't often, but that would be the better way to go because of that door weight. Moving to page 2 is going to show us figure 3, which illustrates a door and jamb where Soss hinges are mounted. They're basically saying, become familiar with those terms, the hinge jamb, the installation points, the head jamb, the door rabbet. You're going to want to know what those terms refer to because they'll be used further on in the installation instructions. Now, jamb preparation, refer to figure 4. Figure 4 basically shows you what the jamb would look like if you're standing in the opening and looking at the jamb. You're going to take this hinge template and you're going to flush the spacing tab like this. This one's loose. That's okay. You can tighten that up if you want it to keep it from moving, but it's supposed to move. And you're just going to butt this to the inside, underside of the header. Your 2 locating pins are resting against the face of the jamb. Okay. You will then take your nails and attach it securely to the jamb. And let's take a look here now at the rest of the installation instructions regarding that. Step 1 is to remove the guide pins from the router guide. We talked about that. If it was me, I would keep them in and I'd do the deep portion first. But however, before you do that, you need to drill a starter hole so that you can insert the bit into. And table 4 shows you the starter hole depth, and because we're doing the 218, that starter hole depth is going to be 1 in 23/32. Now, you're going to notice right away that the depth of that starter hole is awfully deep. So if you're using a piece of 3/4 inch jamb stock for your jamb, you're going to notice that a lot of that hinge is going to be hanging out. And furthermore, when you get down into the mortise depth for the faceplate of the hinge itself, which is shown in table B on page 2, you're at 13/32. So your frame construction is going to have to be compatible, first of all, with these types of hinges. 3/4 inch jamb won't work for these. Okay, so they're saying remove the guide pins. I would say do that second. Place the router template on the hinge jamb so the locator pins rest flush against the pull side of the jamb face and around the inside of the intended door swing. Basically what they're saying is you're standing on the pull side of the door. Okay. The spacer tab should be flush against the head jamb and positioned in line with the template, i.e. tab positioned as packaged. The spacer tab should be flush against the head jamb, just tap that flush, and positioned in line with the template. I think what they're saying is make sure that this is tight against the face of the jamb. Step 3, once the desired position is established, the nails can be tapped into the rabbet to secure the template in place. And figure 4 again shows that. That starter depth hole, you're going to want to take a 1/2 inch, a spade bit would be okay. And you're going to want to mark that and very carefully drill that. I would personally hold the template in place. I would mark all of my starter holes once I knew the center line of where all my hinges were. And probably what I would do is make an indicator line on this template itself, so that when I measured on my jamb where my center line of all my hinges were, I could then locate the template on the edge of the door just loosely, mark my hole, mark all of my holes, drill my starter holes. Consolidating the operations into a single step is the point. Okay. The 1/2 inch diameter, 1 in 23/32, you're going to drill that starter hole. That will need to be there, certainly. It doesn't need to be there, but what you need to know is how deep you're going to be prepping. So the factory tells you that you can set the depth of the bit to the required depth and then route. They also say because you're removing a significant amount of wood, if desired, the required depth may be obtained by making multiple router passes. That would be the way to go. You're going to not make one pass. It's far more wood than can be removed. It's dangerous to take your router and set that bit so deep. And I'm not a woodworking expert, but I've machined literally tens of thousands of doors for every piece of hardware that I've ever come across. Everything from a hinge to an olive knuckle hinge to overhead stops, from the quite simple and straightforward to things requiring multiple processes by hand and with computer-aided machinery. Routers are going to have stops on them on the side. Some of them certainly will. And that would be what I would recommend. And specifically what I'm referring to is a post that you can set on the side of the router so that when you plunge deep enough, it will dead stop and tell you that you're done at that point. That was a feature that I used, all the time, obviously, in this sort of instance. Now, we were talking about the starter depth. You've got the hole, you have to drill that. Locate the router template. The top location will be fixed. They're basically saying this is the dimension for the first hinge. Then space them out accordingly, following whatever rules and regulations best meet your requirements. Nail the template down. Your starter hole should, in my opinion, should already be drilled, but if not, drill it. Be careful not to nick or gouge the template as you're entering or exiting the template itself with your tool. That's where you're going to damage the tool. I would never lift the spinning router off the template till it was utterly turned off, stopped from its rotation. So step 6 on page 2 is routing the hinge outline. The chart in table B lists the maximum depths to which the hinge outlines should be routed. The hinge outline is the plate or the larger, thinner, shallower preparation that I would recommend you do second. And that's why you would already have had the hinge pins removed so that you could do that. But you'll do your, you'll do the deep prep and then you'll do your hinge outline. They're showing you the table there of the depth of what you're going to drill for the outside thinner portion of the hinge, just the face or the plate of that hinge, 13/32. Again, multiple passes using a stop on the router. And then continue down through all of the rest of the hinges. They're saying, remember the distances you have selected, as you will need to recall those measurements when routing the template on the door. So top of the inside of the header to the center line of each hinge, record those dimensions. Obviously double check those dimensions when you're doing them as well, so that you can be completely sure of what you are transposing onto the next workpiece. When you do your first hinge now, the thickness of this stop spacer is about 1/8 of an inch. When you do your first hinge, I'm just turning this over. It doesn't really matter because it's equidistant. You're going to use this and hang it on the top of the door. And this will automatically give you that 1/8 of an inch margin you need from the underside of the header to the top of the door. And then mark all your hinge locations, repeat the steps and processes for mortising everything. We're now in the lower right-hand area of page 2 under door preparation. Prior to mounting the template on the door, make certain that your door is oriented properly. Obviously, be sure you're routing the proper side of the door. Not only the proper end, but the proper face of the door as well. When I would route stuff, the side that I'm facing is always the pull side, because I would take that template with the locator pins and work from it this way. And it would always be as well the high side of the door if it was a beveled door. The clearance between the head jamb and the door is set with the spacer tab. It should, we just discussed that. Place the router guide template on the door so the locator pins rest flush against the face of the door. Nail it down. Double check everything before you put a router onto the edge of the door. Now, getting into page 3 now, lists says that on step 6, that table B will give you those maximum dimensions. We've discussed that. The 218 requires a 1330 seconds. Repeat the steps is what the rest of the installation instructions call out. And what they're saying in the rest of the page 3 is you have on the frame and on the door done one of the two preparations. They've basically said remove the guide pins and do the plate preparation in all locations on the frame and the door. Then insert those pins and go back and do all of them. Okay, that's what they say. They're saying that because you don't want to be taking these in and out, because this is wood, you'll wear it out eventually. And to minimize how often you're doing that. I personally would follow the installation instructions if I had a very low amount of volume on the door work, meaning I don't do Soss hinges often kind of logic. Otherwise, I would seek to consolidate without having to reposition the template, because that invites a template not fitting back onto the door as snugly as it did. And while it won't really move, you'll notice that the ability to keep it tight down to the door becomes compromised when you've put nails into the door and you've pulled the nails out. Now you're going to insert them back in. So I'm always suspect in terms of proceeding with routing something in this sort of fashion. The other side, or the other option of doing it in this regard, would be having, multiple templates where you have some of them with the pins removed and you've got enough to attach them like to the frame all at once and then to the door all at once. So maybe your experience will end up teaching you the best way to proceed, but relocating a template multiple times is something that I don't I have found I don't trust as much, because I can't keep that template down and tight to the edge of the door as much as I would like to. It becomes loose, is the bottom line. A nail into a hole 2 times, it's going to be loose the second time. So completing the door and jamb mortises, same operation. You've got the pins inserted in according to the installation instructions. Again, I would do it opposite. Mounting the door to the jamb, at that point you're going to just simply hang the door and frame, and that would be standard hinge installation work. The last page of the installation instructions shows an entire kit and a template, and I can tell you that if you do these all the time, and you're always doing 6/8 doors, or you're always doing 7/0 doors, you will save not only time, which is the only resource that is not renewable that in our lives, right? But you will be saving yourselves the potential for error. The only exposure to risk you have is if that template moves. If you've pulled it off the door and you've hit it onto something. In the early days of machining doors by hand, I would have a Porter cable hinge butt template guide, and I literally, because I would do 7/0 doors every day, I welded those pieces together because I was always doing those locations, and I did this hundreds of times. So for me, that was quite safe. So if you're setting up for a job and you've got lots of doors to do, that template, while the job might end and you'll not have a future use for the entire kit, you only need to monetize the advantage of that just one time to make it worthwhile. Because it will keep everything straight and organized. And you can look over that overview on page 4 of the installation instructions. Now finally, there is a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Soss products that we sell, but a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. The bottom line with Soss is they are a very elegant way to hang a door and frame, meaning the hardware is concealed. Another advantage of Soss is that they are incredibly capable at easily handling very heavy doors. A pair and a half of heavyweight butt hinges, you get over 200 pounds on a door, and you are really on the outside edge of what that sort of hardware can be expected to perform reasonably well with over time. For Soss hinges, that's a walk in the park. I've read somewhere in a Soss catalog, basically, I think that was a much older version of the catalog. It basically said, I don't care how heavy your door is, keep adding Soss hinges, we'll hang it. There is a table in the Soss catalog that will basically say, what's the weight of the door, what hinge are you using, and it will tell you how many hinges to use for that. And that's very helpful because that guide is there because it's been put together in such a way that it works. It's known to be compatible. But the other point regarding the manufacturer's full-line catalog is you'll be able to see all of the Soss hinges that exist. The 218 is incredibly common. 307/0 inch and 3/4 door, you're going to use a 218. You might be able to make a 216 work, or you might need to go to the 220, or you might be interested to review their barrel type hinges. You might want to see their self-closing model of the 218, or the ones that are intended for steel doors, the ones that are fire rated. And then there's some other hardware that's in that catalog that you might not be aware of, and you might say, oh, I'm glad to know where I can get my hands on a magnetic door holder that can be positioned in multiple sorts of orientations and still hold the door open. So Soss, a name that I'll say to someone, well, have you considered a Soss hinge? They'll say, oh yeah, I've been using those for years, I forgot all about them, or I've never heard of them, what are they, etc. And I suppose the people that are already very familiar with, we don't have that conversation. But the point regarding Soss hinges, they can very elegantly solve the problem that you might have if you're looking for a concealed, single acting. Keep in mind that Soss hinges do, because they have a floating point or vertical axis of pivoting, it will affect other hardware, such as an overhead concealed door stop. You'll want to have that hardware templated for the hinge, because with a regular hinge, the vertical axis of pivoting doesn't move at all. But with a Soss hinge, that vertical axis of pivoting does actually arc through the opening ever so slightly, so you need to account for that. Anyway, if you have any questions on the Soss 218-IT, their router template for the 218 hinge, or any other Soss product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.